Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. It's me, the South African Wanderer. And firstly, apologies for my nasal voice. I've been struggling with a little bit of flu, I think it is, or a head cold, I'm not too sure. And my sinuses have been giving me a lot of trouble. But the proverbial show must go on. So here we are. So towards the middle of September, I got my hands on PJ's 400mm f2.8 G Master lens. So this video is going to be a little bit of a field test of that lens. The lens is quite a old lens, so it was released in 2018. And almost as soon as it was released, I began to covet the lens. It is one of Sony's, I would say, top shelf lenses, with the others being the 600mm f4 and the more recently released 300mm f2.8. And this is for people who are more wildlife focused photographers, and you need these large telephoto lenses to capture wildlife and birding in particular. So the 400mm f2.8 G Master lens, as its name suggests, is a f2.8 lens with a prime focal length of 400 millimeters. And when it was released in 2018, it was one of the lightest lenses in its class, weighing in at just 2.89 kilos. So 2.9 kilos rounding up, which made it very versatile as a wildlife lens. And being a G Master lens, it means it uses the best quality glass that Sony has to offer, as well as better motors and things like that that help it autofocus faster and move the elements within the lens around faster, so that your photography is professional level photography. One of the reasons I've only coveted this lens and never got my hands on it is at its launch date, the lens retailed for $12,000 US, so $12,000 in 2018. I'd say the second half of 2018. So it was well out of reach of my pockets, let me say. And because Sony never released any Mark II version or lenses that actually could almost replace the lens until the 300mm f2.8 that they recently released, not many secondhand units were on the market either. So you almost had to buy this lens brand new and pay the equivalent of a good mid-sized family car to get one. And that's why I never bought one. And to get your hands on it is very rare as well. So I'm grateful that PJ lent me his for 24 hours. And I could go out and shoot with it for a little while. So to put the lens through its paces, I did almost two separate trips. The first being to Monte Cassino and the bird gardens at Monte Cassino specifically, to try and get some photos of the macaws. Hey guys, so we are at the Monte Cassino bird gardens. I just got my 200-600 on, and we're going to try to get a few pictures of some of the macaws in particular. Very colorful birds, so would be good to get them, and then see if we can get anything else as well. We're going to try and compare this 200-600 that I have on with the 400mm that I've borrowed from PJ. So yeah, let's see how it goes and whether we can find them. So why I went to Monte Cassino specifically is the macaws that are there are very colorful and make for good subjects, firstly. And then they do tend to sit on those perches that they are on and don't move around too much. So you can actually do proper comparative photography, taking shots of them. And because it's a more controlled environment, you can, step around, move around, and things like that, and frame the birds better. I used my 200, 600 mil lens, as I said in the video, because that is my almost daily shooter. I could have used my 100, 400 mil lens that's on the shelf behind me, and shot with that, and then got 400 mil versus 400 mil. But I actually used that 200 to 600 mil lens that I have almost 90% of the time that I'm out shooting. So I wanted to compare it to the 400 mil as almost a daily shooter. So let me put up the first few shots, and I won't label them initially because it takes a very trained eye to actually see the difference between the shots taken with the 200, 600 and the 400 mil. So I was shooting the 200, 600 at around 400 mil. I tried to get it to 400 millimeters. And the 400 prime, obviously, I then tried to match the framing by moving around with my feet, basically, and make sure that the birds were framed the same in both shots. So this first two shots, I sent it to PJ and the rest of the guys just to check if they could pick up which was which. And initially they did struggle a little bit, but then if you look closely, you will pick up that the background on the 200, 600 is a little bit more, I'd say, noisy, not as blown out as the 400 mil. And then when you look at the 400 mil, you'll see that the background, especially at F2.8, is very smooth and very creamy. And you'll see that the focus falls off very quickly on the perch that the bird is on as well. So just the initial photos to show that in good light, the 200, 600 may be able to get you good images, except maybe for the background blur. But where that background blur comes into play is the next set of images. So you'll see I deliberately shot with this stick behind the bird I was taking photos of. So I had the bird eye autofocus on, and the bird eye autofocus caught almost all the time that I was at the Monte Cassino Bird Gardens. And you'll see that, at f6.3, the stick behind the bird's head is quite apparent. Whereas if you look at the f2.8 image from the 400 mil, you'll see that that stick melts away and is less obtrusive in the photo. Also look at the second bird in the frame and how out of focus it is with the 400 mil, and you can still quite clearly see it with the 200, 600. I then took a couple shots in the shade. So these aren't framed exactly the same because the bird was moving around. But you'll see that firstly, because the 200, 600 is f6.3, to keep the ISO the same and that way eliminate some noise, I had to bump the shutter speed down to 1/640th on the 200, 600 shot. But because the 400 mil allows you that f2.8, you can still shoot relatively fast, so 1/2000, with the ISO capped the same. So you'll also see on this picture that that f2.8 blurs out the background, and again with the 6.3 on the 200/600, the background is much more in focus. I think one of the important considerations is that shutter speed in low light, and that's where the f2.8 on the 400mm comes into play. Just to illustrate the point a little bit more is I then took this comparison shots. Again, the birds are not framed exactly the same, but you'll see that the ISO on the 200/600 with the shutter speed capped at 1/1250 is 2000 ISO, whereas if we drop that 400mm to f4 even, you still have that same shutter speed, 1/1250th, but your ISO drops to 1250 as well. And if you zoom in on this image, you can see the noise difference between 2000 and 1250. I could then go all the way to f2.8, which I did in the next two shots. Again, kept the shutter speed relatively the same at 1/1250, but then with the f2.8, you can get the ISO down to 400. So, shooting in relatively similar lighting conditions, that f2.8 gives you quite a bit less ISO, and therefore that translates into quite a bit less noise as well. The other thing to notice on this one is the depth of field when you're shooting f2.8 if you have multiple subjects in the photo. So obviously you're going to struggle, if the birds aren't in the same plane, like you can see with the 200/600. Shooting at f6.3, you still get a little bit of blur on the second bird. But when you switch to the f2.8, that blur on that second bird becomes, I think, almost intrusive. It becomes much more apparent. And what you'll have to do then is almost step down to make sure that you get a little bit more focus, I think, on that second bird. So just to show that as well. And then the last series of shots I just wanted to show again, shooting against a dark background, what the background blur looks like by firstly keeping the aperture the same. So you'll see that I shot both at f6.3 initially, just to try and keep the aperture the same. And for some reason, shooting with the same shutter speed, the 400mm needed a little bit more ISO. I'm not too sure why that was. Maybe it is the distance I was to the bird, which may be a little bit off on between the two lenses. And then I dropped the aperture on the 400 to f2.8, and you'll see what was a little bit more noisy background becomes a much cleaner, much creamier background that is almost desirable. And yeah, I really like the image I got, even though I'm shooting on a background that's got both light and dark spots in it. I think then the last couple comparisons I wanted to do while we were at the Monte Cassino Bird Gardens was obviously with the 200/600mm you can zoom, and shooting with a prime lens means that the zooming that you're going to do is moving yourself and the lens and the camera physically front and back. So you can get a little bit different images with the zoom lens, which is advantageous to some degree. But if you look at, for instance, the 200mm shot, you'll see that the background is quite a bit more visible and distracts a little bit more. Whereas, you can zoom all the way into 600, and what happens is with the 200 600 mil, when you're shooting at 600, and you're close to the subject, the lens compression actually allows for the background to be more blur, and you can almost replicate the shots of the 400 at a much wider aperture. The problem being is that you need a good light on the subject. You need, you know, a sunny day to be shooting at f6.3, and then you can, drop your shutter speed a little bit and have low ISO in the shots. In terms of minimum focusing distance, both lenses are about the same. The 200 600 mil has a minimum focusing distance of 2.5 meters, and the 400 mil has a minimum focusing distance of 2.7 meters, I think, being a prime and being a wide prime. You'll see in terms of the detail you get on the 400 is quite, I think, insane, quite spectacular. But shooting at that f2.8, shooting fully open, means that the drop-off you get when you're shooting the subject that is quite close up, the focal drop-off is quite significant as well. You can see it even on these first few feathers on the wing itself, and then as you go further down the back and things like that. So just testing the minimum focal distance there. And then the last couple shots I wanted to show side by side is, just again, the advantages of possibly having the zoom on the 200 600 mil, where you could zoom out if there was action happening. So on this shot, I was standing against the fence of the enclosure behind me, so could not go any further back. So the second bird gets cut off, and then, by the time I had the chance to go and change the lens and zoom out, the second bird was no longer doing what it was doing, so I missed the action there. I think, again, just look at the background, and at 200 mil even worse, because that lens compression is not there. The background is quite intrusive in the picture compared to the 400 mil. Then I walked around a little bit more and got a few more shots of the birds in Monte Cassino. I think shooting at Monte Cassino was a good idea, and I really enjoyed, the controlled nature of the bird park, and will use the bird park again to do similar comparisons. I think it's a good location, and you get to see some birds that you don't normally see in South Africa, like these macaws, the yellow and blue macaw and the green wing macaw that I showed in the pictures are native to South America, and you don't really get to see them unless they are captive birds, or you spend the money and go out to Brazil and sort of South America and go and get them in their natural habitat. There's a wood duck. So one of the things with the 400 mil is this lens cover needs to go somewhere while you're shooting. Jay taught me that you can put it on your head and walk around with it, and that way you don't leave it behind anywhere as you're walking. So then once I'd finished up at Monte Cassino, I headed off to Rietvlei, which is my normal stomping ground for testing out these cameras. Morning guys, so this is the field test portion of using the 400 mil. I've got the 1.4 times converter on it, so it's going to be equivalent to 560 f4 shooting wide open, and 5.6 shooting step down. So we at Rietvlei this morning, and I'm hoping to get some shots of hopefully the
African stone chat, and then we'll make our way almost to the Island View hide, and then hopefully get some birds in flight as they move across the front of the hide. And yeah, whatever else we see on the way as well. Primary focus is going to be getting birds, but obviously at Replay we may also get some animals as well. And then I think more than the shots we get, going to try and see how easy it is to use this 400mm lens as we driving, picking it up, moving it around, and things like that, because that's how I do most of my shooting. So we're just coming up on a lapwing. Oh, don't move around. So yeah, we'll try and get some good shots and see what we can see, but we'll give our conclusions once we're back at home again.
So I think a disclaimer to add to the video is that I shot with the 1.4 teleconverter, as I said in the intro video to the replay morning, and it may not have been the best choice. I think PJ has said that his 1.4 may be a bit soft, and on a couple of the images that I got while shooting, with that 400 and the 1.4 converter on, I did see a little bit of softness. So I think we need to test PJ's teleconverter out properly, just to make sure it's calibrated properly and works as it should be. But if you are a bird photographer and you get the 400mm lens, you want to be shooting with the 1.4 converter on, just to get you that little bit of extra length. So you are at 560 millimeters, and then you're shooting at f4 because the 1.4 converter adds a full stop of aperture almost. I would almost then say that you could, in good light, even step down to f5.6 and still get relatively good results. I think from the pictures I took while driving around at Replay, I was really impressed, with the lens. The image quality I got, especially when the subjects were close up, was really good, and the prime lens, shooting wide open aperture, really gives that almost 3D effect in the photo, where it separates the subject from the background, which I really enjoyed, even in the low light of the early morning. I think I did see a little bit of that softness as the subjects got further away, and you'll see that in the images as well. While I was out, I did get a chance to shoot a little bit of video, and you'll see the video is quite steady. I think I enjoyed that of the 400mm lens. Even though it's a little bit heavier, you can handhold and shoot video, and it does get decent usable handheld video as well. But I think in terms of usability, the lens is quite a big unit, so it does take some maneuvering, especially when you're shooting to the right. When I'm sitting in the car and shooting out my driver's side window, it's quite tough, I'd say, because you have to move the lens, between yourself and the steering wheel. Shooting out the left or the passenger side window is reasonably easy, and I enjoy that more. I think even with the 200, 600mm, I enjoy shooting out the passenger side window a little bit more as well. And then in the hide, you can take along a beanbag or even a tripod sometimes, and you can have the lens in the hide, resting for most of the time. So you're not holding the lens physically all the time. You're in the hide. But if you are shooting birds in flight, like I was trying to shoot some birds in flight, you have to, pick up the lens from time to time and move it off the beanbag. And given that the weight is, quite light, it's still quite maneuverable and enjoyable to use. I didn't really mind using the lens as much, except when, like I said, I was shooting out the right-hand side. I think the other thing that I needed to get used to a little bit while out in the field is that having a prime and not having the ability to zoom meant that I had to reposition the car a few times, just so that I could frame my shots properly, because that ability to zoom in and out, I think, makes you a little bit lazier when it comes to positioning. And you stop and you can shoot, by zooming in or out. Whereas with the prime lens, you have to make sure that framing the subject properly, which sometimes means, moving away or moving closer to the subject as the situation deems. So yeah, all in all, a good experience shooting PJ's 400mm lens. I think in terms of image quality, that first afternoon at Monte Cassino, it just blew my mind, the smoothness and the creaminess of the background on the shots. I think I loved shooting the macaws, and even though I spent like just about 2 hours with them, I really enjoyed it. And there'll be arguments that it's not true bird photography because they're captive birds, but sometimes to practice, it's really good practice going into a bird sanctuary like the one at Monte Cassino. And then shooting at Riclay, like I said, I think I noticed some softness, especially with the further away images. So I may have been better off just shooting with the 400mm without the 1.4 times converter on it. But the lens is quite usable and maneuverable, but I think will take some time getting used to. And if you own the lens, you will master it with time shooting in the bush. I think one interesting thing to keep an eye out is that Sony has this year released the 300mm f2.8 lens, and with the 1.4 converter, that will shoot at 420, and with the 2 times converter at 600 and f 5.6. So comparing that new lens to some of the older lens, this 400mm and the 600mm would be a good exercise. I think that 300mm lens is even lighter. I think it's about 1.5 kilos compared to this 2.9 kilos of the 400mm. So it's a much more compact lens and makes for much easier shooting. I think it's almost equivalent to shooting with the 100-400 on the camera. So I would love to get my hands on that one, but yeah, demo units of that lens is like finding a needle in a haystack in South Africa. So unfortunately, we'll have to wait. But if I do get that lens in my hands, I will do a similar outing and just see how that lens shoots. So I think I'm going to leave it here for now. I hope you enjoyed my little field outing with the 400mm f2.8 lens, and we'll catch you on the next one.